Well, we're here at the mill, another important spot at this ranch to most people that have lived here. They've gone by this a bunch of times, and the creek that we showed you earlier, it actually leads to this. Just make sure you get out of your tube before you get to the dam. But it's really about the racing here, and I'm going to illustrate, I've been announcing this race for 23 straight years, some of the stories of today's pros and how they got discovered here and went on to become what they are now at the very highest level. So I'm going to start with Joe Shimoda, who was pretty fast on 85s for a while, but he had a real big breakout in Super Minis. He's battling it out with Seth Hamaker, who you also know from Supercross, but he won Super Mini title in 2016. He was a KTM rider at the time, got the coveted Geico Honda deal, and that took him into the pros. And that's when he knew it was time to move to America full-time and really pursue this. Hayden Deegan, no surprise, already had a lot of hype in his early Loretta's days, but he was luckless. I remember his engine blowing up when he could have won a 50cc championship. He ended up going 1-1-18, got edged by Casey Cochran, who's still racing Deegan to this day. So again, where they're on 50s. And I talked to Brian Deegan that day, and he said, man, I hope we're not cursed here. I never won a title at this ranch. Now, Brian was very good at Loretta's, but as he said, I was the same age as Kevin Windham, and Kevin Windham was unbeatable here, and I never got a title. So he was afraid that maybe Hayden was headed that same way. 2 years later, he finally did get a title, 2017, in the 65 10-11 division. Jet Lawrence, even though he's from Australia, did come to Loretta Lynn's once because the family had already moved here, so Hunter could race as a pro. It was like a bomb went off when he won his very first moto here, which is not normally what anyone does. And then he had that all-time battle we've talked about quite a bit with Jalek Swoll, where they essentially tied. Swoll got the win by 1,000th of a second, and that was enough for him to win that title. And then Jet's bike broke in the other class, so he ended up without a title in his one visit here, but he was 15 years old. He would go on to do plenty of big things as a pro. One of the other cool things about Loretta's is sometimes the mini cycle classes, riders will dominate there, and someone who's sitting on the outside looking in when they move to the full-size bikes really steps up. I'll give you a couple examples of those riders. It was Levi Kitchen here a few years ago, 2020, came out of nowhere. He was maybe a top 5, top 6 kid. He won all of his motos in the B class in 2020, got signed by Star Racing, has gone on to a successful pro career. Similar also to Chance Hymas. There was a really stacked B class in 2020 that he was in. Jet Reynolds had been dominating on mini cycles. He was probably the favorite. Hymas ended up getting a championship that year. That led to a factory ride with Honda that he still has to this day. Chase Sexton, most of his career is overshadowed by Austin Forkner in the B class in 2015. Forkner beat him in just about every moto. But credit to the Geico Honda team for saying, man, if Sexton's close enough to even stay close to Forkner like he did, it might be worth taking a shot with that kid. He went to the Geico Honda team, and the next year completely dominated. Forkner had already gone pro at that point, but Sexton's career obviously has worked out pretty well. And if you go even further back, Eli Tomac won a lot of mini cycle championships as a Suzuki prospect, and then he moved to that Geico Honda team, and some of the biggest leads we've ever seen at Loretta Lynn's ranch when he was a B rider, and he didn't even come back to race A, or what they call pro sport here. He was ready to go race pro, and if you remember right, he won his first pro race ever coming out of Loretta's. That was amazing. And Justin Barcia did similar things in the B class on Hondas right before him. So if you look at the history of this event, that's that pathway. Very, very few. There are stories of riders that didn't have success here that did as pros. They're pretty rare. And I can go all the way back to Cooper Webb, who won a PW50. That is the smallest motorcycle here, the 4 to 6 class. Won a championship in a PW50 in 2002. Still racing Yamahas now and still doing pretty darn well.